So welcome to those that know of us and those who have never applied with us before. And this is a really exciting fund that we've run. This is our third year of running it now alongside the Cornwall VSF. And Cornwall Community Foundation's role within it is to administer this fund that's part of the programme. So the People in Mind Community Wellbeing Fund. So, as I said, it's part of a larger programme. So there's a People in Mind programme that Cornwall VSF run, and it's actually around the mental health and suicide prevention in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. So part of that wider programme are all the groups that you can see here. So there's us in the middle, of course, because we administer the Community Wellbeing Fund, Age UK, Chaos Group, Citizens Advice Cornwall, Clear Cornwall, Cornwall Mind, Pentraeth, Volunteer Cornwall and Young People Cornwall. So they already are part of this wider People in Mind programme. And what this is then a fund that's within it. It's jointly funded by Cornwall and Isles of Scilly Integrated Care Board. I'll refer to them as ICB as we go, and Cornwall Council Public Health. So it's a collaborative that then supports people aged 16 and over and is delivered in this partnership. So we're then that community fund part of it. It's a collaborative core service. It's being delivered by 8 key volunteer sectors, but then this fund can provide grants to other voluntary organisations and community groups. So your work should be with people aged 16 plus that are most at risk of poor mental health, self-harm or suicide. So this fund has around £175,000 in it. For its third year, 130,000 of that is by the Integrated Care Board and Public Health, and then 45,000 of that comes from a donation from the Sir Dowell Collins Foundation that we also work with. So to jump into the key dates of the decision, so you've got them all in your head. The application deadline for this is on 19th of December, and then Lisa will be working away over Christmas time. Ready for a panel on the 26th of February. So how a lot of it works is we then gather all those applications together. CCF themselves don't make the final decision. We give our recommendation, and then it will go to a panel of various experts. So there'll be members from Cornwall VSF there, people that have worked in the sector, the third sector with sort of wellbeing hats on. They make the final decisions, and then you'll get your decision on the start of March. Hopefully it's successful. But if it's not, what we do then try to do, because we run over 70 different funds, there's quite a lot to us. We will then try and move people around if it was a good fit, but actually it didn't have enough space or didn't quite fit the criteria as much as others. We will then try and move people to places. Can't always be done, may not be able to be done with, I suppose, the amount of applications we're expecting, but what we always try to do is move it. The grant value is 1,000 to 10,000 per year for up to 3 years. It can facilitate some multi-year funding, but that is not going to be too many. It's not predominantly multi-year funded. Predominantly it'll be for single year funding, and then we will be able to facilitate a few multi-years. So wanted to make that clear. Right, so applications for projects and activities. This is something I really want to stress, is that the criteria would be looking for something that supports the reduction of the suicide rate in Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly, whether that be suicide prevention. So more so than generalised wellbeing, it is looking on a bit of a focus lens of the reduction of suicide rates. That might be through improving mental and emotional well-being, increasing social connection, a huge one in Cornwall with the amount of rural isolation we have, and increasing financial security and debt reduction. So there are 3 sort of splinters of that. The core is the mental health around reduction of suicide, which is made clear, I suppose, by the target population groups that have been chosen. So overall, all the beneficiaries must be 16 plus and at risk of poor mental health, self-harm or suicide. But priority will be given to the following groups. So they're looking at men, again, something that suicide rate is often hidden. Farming, fishing communities, very specific to our area. People experiencing loneliness and isolation, well, that does open up the priority area because a lot of loneliness and isolation happens in our county. People with diagnosed or undiagnosed neurodivergence, we especially wanted to keep undiagnosed because we know of wait times around neurodivergence for getting a diagnosis. And the LGBTQ community are some of our target population groups. And then there is sort of a geographical focus. It's not to say that funding won't be given to these unhighlighted areas. It's just that we would then like to see applications from this area too. So there is a little bit of a focus or an interest in North Cornwall and East Cornwall. There's our little office in Bodmin, so that's our little dot, and the Lizard Peninsula, purely because it's an area that hasn't had as much funding from this pot in the previous 2 years. So if you're there, that's another bonus. I've put on here, because I will be sending the slides out after today, there is links on year 1 and year 2 to all the groups that were funded in the previous 2 rounds. So you're able to get a flavour of who was successful and what they were able to achieve and what they're looking for. If there is anyone on here, I've seen a few that were recipients of a Community Wellbeing Fund in year 1 or year 2, you can apply for funding this year as long as you have returned your end of grant report forms, so that we're able to see what you did with that money beforehand. Some examples of the projects that have been supported. So we've got here Pegasus Men's Wellbeing Centre, which I've seen is here today. So their grant in the first year enabled the Zero Suicide Warriors project, which supported 250 men through counselling and group therapy. Safe Haven supported 300 transgender and non-binary people and their partners and families to engage with activities. They had a trans fest, which is fantastic. And then there's St Petrox. They were funded for their Freshfield project, which provided counselling and telephone support to 90 people who are or have been homeless. So sort of the range of types of group that we can support, different various counselling, group therapies, activities to reduce loneliness, and all in our priority groups. One key thing that we would be looking for with this fund is how it engaged with those core partners that are part of that wider People in Mind programme. So there should be some evidence of how you work with them or how you would work with them, whether that's signposting to their services, creating connections and referrals, formal or informal. It's just that showing that you are working within the wider People in Mind programme. So they are AGK, Chaos Group, Citizens Advice Cornwall, Clear, Cornwall Mind, Pentreth, Volunteer Cornwall, and Young People Cornwall, as a reminder. You may already have established connections with them, but it would then be a case of establishing connections with them if you haven't already. We as a grants team follow something called the IVAR principles, which we wanted to really make clear during this process. So it's 8 commitments: that we don't waste time, we ask relevant questions, we accept risk, communicate with purpose, act with urgency, be open, enable flexibility, and be proportionate. Just something that we wanted to sort of show before this application process goes through, especially that one of be open. We do really want to make it clear that you can tell by the amount of people that have come to this session, which is fantastic, that this fund does get quite oversubscribed because of the topic that it is, which we need as funders to know that the need is there and to be able to develop more funding for mental health and wellbeing. But to be completely transparent, last year in year 2, we had 180,000 to give and 800,000 amounts funded. So it will be competitive. So we really wanted to put this session on so people can go, yep, I really fit that criteria and that is going to be a good use of my time, because ultimately we want it to be successful use of your time and ours. But yes, we will try and move people around, but it is going to be a trickier one. And it's part of our IVARD principles to be transparent with that. As there are some people here, you can see the yellow screen bouncing off me, as there are some people here that haven't worked with CCF before, generally this is the documentation that you would need to provide for funding with us. So you'd need a recognised governing document, whether that's a constitution, articles of association. We ask for 3 unrelated members on your committee, whether that's trustees, just committee members. Details registered with the Charity Commissions or Companies House, or if you're not needed, just register where they need to be. Safeguarding policy, we ask for that for all applicants. It doesn't matter if you're just not working with children, there are vulnerable adults, so we ask for a safeguarding policy in all. A bank account, which requires 2 unrelated signatories, and a bank statement within the last 3 months. We only really need a full update of documentation every 3 years, but you can imagine with a safeguarding policy often updated every year. Bank statement, that's one that we need every 3 months. We try and keep it as simple as possible. We do ask that you're based in Cornwall or the Isles of Scilly, or that your work is specifically for Cornwall and Isles of Scilly. We do ask that the project be completed within a year. Often if you're going for multi-year, then that would be different. And if you are applying for multi-year funding, an interim end of grant report must be received before the next funds are released. So that's your ins and outs. And of course, we have lots of other different funds, and this would be the case. And if there's any other funding that you want to explore with Cornwall Community Foundation, I'm your go-to person. I think you all have my email, but I will send things off at the end. Who we cannot support, so again, being transparent with some things that we cannot. If they're outside of Cornwall, individuals or projects that only help one. We have a few that are for individuals, but not in this case. If you're commercial profit, if you're contributing to endowment, if you are a statutory public sector organisation, so for example, we cannot support town and parish councils, but we can support an association. We can't support schools directly, but we can support PTAs. That's purely because we were set up as a charity and that wasn't our focus. Promotion of political causes or projects intended to influence people's religious choices or beliefs. Something that's already happened, we can't do retrospective grants. Regional offices and national bodies that do not benefit local people. Everything's about local Cornish community. If they're not people, it can be animals and such, but they need to benefit the community. Grant-making organisations and organisations with significant free reserves. So how our process then works is it is 1-stage online application. Hopefully some of you have seen that form and started the process. And that's simply it. Finish the form and it gets sent to our assessors. In this case, it will be Lisa who's on here today, and either Lisa herself will assess or it gets sent to some of our external assessors that we work with. Something we then pride ourselves on is we then will ask further questions. Obviously now, depending on the size of applicants that we do have, they may be briefer questions, but we will always try to get that detail. That's why we're asking for this one. Submitting applications earlier is always better because it just spreads that workload for our assessors and allows them to really delve more deeply into detail. If they're all to come in on that final day, then it's a lot to get through. And the reason we do gather that more information is because it goes to that panel. We want to go into that panel feeling like we can really represent your group and know this project like the back of our hands. So if questions do come up during the panel, we're then equipped to represent your project. So please do always keep contactable within that time frame, because that will slow down the process if we're having to ask 3 or 4 times to get that detail. The panel will then make that decision and you will be informed of the decision. Hopefully the grant will be received, and then around that year later or interim ones for that multi-year, we ask for an end of grant report form, which is really just a chance for us to, yes, check you did what you said you would do, but to be able to tell the stories and create case studies and just shout about your great work. So I noticed this sort of within the chat, and we will get to those at the end, but this is sort of a breakdown of what our application form looks like. It is a bit more detailed. Ordinarily, we usually have 3 questions, but because this is a fund supplied by the ICB and Stell Collins, we need to look a bit deeper because it is expected to be quite subscribed. There's a few more questions than would normally be. So you've got your organisation details and an overall aims and objective of your organisation. All our questions are 100 words each to help save time, but it is a tricky thing sometimes to get into those 100 words, so just make sure that they really count. In section 2, this is where we delve a bit more deeper into the project, so actually details of key activities, intended beneficiaries, describe the need for your project, a specific question around how you're going to deal with those core partners, and how that funding or project might progress after the funding, or if it's a one-off project. And then we've given you the chance to offer any more information about the project, and could your project continue if it's part funded. I do always encourage that, because you can imagine when we're in a panel and we can fund this amount, oh, but this person's asked for 10,000 and we only have 9,400 left. Well, if you've said, yes, we could carry on with part funding, just add some details around actually how flexible you can be with that. And then we go into our impact. So what positive changes would it make? And outcomes and indicators, just be as specific as you can with your outcomes. It's a lot for us to be able to see who it's going to, but don't stress too much. Explain how you'll measure and report. That's something we always focus on, because this is one where, because of the programme itself, you are going to be asked about its impact. So think about that throughout. And then just information about the beneficiaries, how many. Don't feel the need to tell us that it's thousands and thousands of beneficiaries if it really isn't. You know, it's about that quality. And then it gets down to the budget, which is a bit different because there's that multi-year offer, and we want it to be as clear as possible, because often budget is the thing that slows down the process the most. And I've seen this as being a specific question. We thought of it already. So Lisa, I'm going to pass on to you. Would you like the next slide?
Yes, please. Yes,
Fab. Just let me know when you want me to click.
Okay. Yeah. So one of the main areas. Sorry, I've got feedback coming here.
Oh, I think it might be me. I'll mute myself a second. There we go.
Yeah. That's better. Yeah, so one of the key areas that we look at is the budgeting side of things. So on this first slide, it's what is the overall cost of the budget? So we're looking at the total cost that you're expected to be spending on this particular project. So whether it is for 1 year or whether it is for 2 years. Then we break it down into the relevant years. So how much are you asking for year 1, year 2, and year 3? Okay, so if you want to click on the next slide there, Shannon, please. Okay, so this example that I've given here is for a 1 year only budget or grant application. And we're looking at sort of like the detail side of things. So if we're making decisions, and for example, if you're only giving part funded, it may be for one part of the element of your actual project. So we're looking for as much detail as possible under each of the headings. So under staff costs, volunteer cost, operational and activities. So the example here I've given for staff projects is that we're going to be funding one particular role at however much per hour for how many weeks of that project. So it's given me a clear understanding of how that, in this case, £8,050 is actually made up. It could well be, if you're looking under the operational activity costs, it could be just a one-off cost. So I've given the example here of £1,000 that we're buying some tools and £300 for a projector. So it gives me that clear sort of understanding exactly where the money's going. So though it's an unrestricted fund, we still need to be able to sort of like highlight the areas of where the money is being invested. Okay, if you'd like to go to the next slide there, Shannon. Okay, so this is where it becomes a little bit more difficult when we're actually applying for multi-year funding. Now, I'm happy to either receive it written down as 1 year and an additional spreadsheet attached to the application for year 2 and 3. But this example here that I've given is saying that the overall project is 38,000 and you're requesting 21,200. And with the total cost, I'm putting the total cost of how much you are putting in for the 3 years. And then you can see the breakdown that I've done for year 1, year 2, and year 3. Now, there might be elements of this particular project that you may not want funding for year 2 and 3. So, for example, then you can just put nil for 2 and 3. Also, if there is any particular item that is over the £2,000 request for one single item, we do require 2 quotes that needs to be attached to the application. And just going back to the beneficiaries, that's another area that I really sort of like look at when we're sort of like calculating the cost to the projects and things like that, to see how beneficiary it's going to be and how much sort of investment you're putting into people, etc. Things like that, is just make sure it is for direct beneficiaries only. So I rather see quality of the actual project rather than quantity. Because if you're sort of putting 1,000 people, it's like, how are you going to be really reaching out to those 1,000 people? Whereas if it's 10 people that you're supporting over a period of time, you would then be sort of like writing in sort of like how many workshops you would be doing with them over that period of time. So it's more about sort of the detail quality rather than the quantity that we would be looking at. Okay, thanks, Shannon.
Fab, thank you. Hopefully that's given, just for me as a finance freaks me out a little bit sometimes, that just popping it down on the list, year 1, year 2, year 3 is super clear for me. But if spreadsheets are then also your thing, we're happy to have it in various ways as long as it's clear and thought through. Fab. So I suppose key takeaways that we want you to keep in mind during this funding round is carefully review your budget to ensure all costs are clearly itemised, particularly for project spans multiple years. Even with that unrestricted element, we still need to sort of see that you have an idea of where that will go, rather than we just need the money for something. Make sure your application fully meets the eligibility criteria, as this is expected to be a highly competitive fund. And submitting your application as early as possible to allow for timely and effective assessment. Hopefully some of you have got the application ready to go and you thought, I'm going to go to this workshop and get the confirmation, and you're ready to send it off. Also for workload around that Christmas time, and for yourselves to be able to get the most out of the process. So this is the support that I can give. I'm aware that there's a few people that have never applied with Cornwall Community Foundation before. So if you are finishing this workshop and think, actually, I don't know if this fund is for me, I really encourage you to get in touch, because there could be some other fund that we provide that would be useful. Or if you just want to find out even more about the People in Mind Fund, you can book a one-to-one support session with me. Signing up to our newsletter is a great way to find out what funds we have coming out. Joining a workshop, hooray, you've done it. But for example, I'm running a workshop on Monday all around our end of grant reports and how you can best show impact to funders. And I do drop-in sessions throughout. There's my contact details if you do want to quickly write them down. And I've put Lisa's on there as well, because Lisa will be your direct contact for People in Mind. Once you've applied for that specific one, Lisa's then the best person to get hold of. So Thank you. I will stop my recording now, and I've seen there's lots of questions in the chat. We'll probably get to those first, and then if you've got anything, use the hands up feature. So